Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be, I guess you can say, an update slash conversation about the polyester yarn propagation and growing method that I have been experimenting with. But before I start talking about that, I just want to say thanks to anyone who's been watching, subscribing, giving a thumbs up, commenting. I've got some really cool conversations going on with people that have been watching the videos, and it really brings a lot of happiness. And I love talking about plants, and I can talk forever about plants. So it's really nice to have people that are willing to talk back about plants, because most people that I know are just like, okay, enough. But thanks guys for watching, for commenting. If you have not subscribed to the channel, I say why not? If you're into plants and you love experimenting and learning new ways to propagate or to grow your plants, I definitely think it would be fun if you subscribe, and we can talk more, and I'll continue doing videos. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And here we go with the video. All right. So I've done a bunch of videos, especially recently, about some of the plants that I have propagated in polyester yarn. This started out just as an experiment because, well, first of all, I love to experiment with plants. And secondly, I wanted something that would be a little bit easier than a lot of the substrates that are out on the market today. Something easier, something that shows some benefit to the growth of the plants, and something that is a possible alternative to growing the plant long term. So I started with the yarn just to propagate. Sometimes with not polyester, sometimes with perlite. I have some back here. See, I am here, guys. Sometimes with perlite, when I'm propagating a cutting in perlite, if I don't sift, because a lot of times I don't, like this one I didn't sift. This is an Inky Fingers Coleus. Sometimes if you don't sift, the particles are so small, and if it stays too wet in that environment, the cutting can dampen off, it can rot, which has happened quite a few times for me. So that's why they recommend you sift out your perlite, so you get larger particles and less of the smaller particles. The only issue is, like with this one over here, you can't really see it. Let me bring it out. This is another Coleus that I rooted in perlite, and you can see we've got some new growth. Can't see any roots yet, but the only problem with this one is because the particles are so much bigger, because they've been sifted, you have to really make sure that they're not drying out too quickly, because a lot of times perlite in particular dries out very quickly. So you just got to keep on top of it, keep a small reservoir for large particles. I tend to not maintain any water in the smaller particle perlite to prevent the rotting. So you keep it, you water it, and let the rest out of the vessel, and it takes a little bit longer for the smaller particles to dry out. In addition to that, I've also propagated in soil like everybody else. That's where I started. Depending on your air circulation and how sterilized your potting mix is, that may not be very helpful to you. I know for me, because it's like stagnant air down here, I don't even have a fan going anymore. Soil just doesn't work here. For this environment, if I was using soil to propagate any of these plants, I would need some air circulation, probably a little bit of a warmer environment, so that the soil does not stay soggy for very long. That is why, well, that's one of the reasons why I have the hydroponic water culture methods going on, because it's so much easier in this environment. I'm not saying that, oh, soil is ridiculous, don't use it. I'm just saying, for me, I've had so many casualties that I've had to retake the cuttings and start fresh in another medium. So, and it's only because of the environment that I'm in. Outside, I can propagate anything in soil. I could just stick it right in the ground. I could stick it in a pot and keep it in the shade. It'll be fine. Just here doesn't work. So one thing I wanted to show you guys is one of these cutted. This was a cutting that was like 2 leaves, I believe, when I first put it in to the yarn, and roots growing all over the place. They were wrapped around the bottom. I was neglecting it. I wasn't watering it enough, so I brought it to the front of the plant area so I won't forget about it. So you have options. If you have propagated a plant in polyester yarn, like I've done here, you can either keep it in the polyester yarn because it's kind of like a conversation piece, kind of pretty, depending on what yarn you're using. As long as you are watering it correctly and not letting it dry out for too long and not keeping it way too soggy. But that's easy to take care of. I can go through that with you if you ask. You can either leave it in the yarn, you can take it out and untangle the roots from the yarn and plant it in soil, or you can plant the entire thing with yarn in the soil. My only disclaimer for that last option is if you're gonna keep the yarn when you're transplanting your cutting, just make sure that whatever medium you're using is very well aerated and will not hold on to too much moisture, because moisture will always remain around the polyester yarn, so you don't want all of the soil to be that soggy. Having said that, I'm going to show you what happens when you remove it from the yarn. This yarn is not soggy, it's just slightly damp. Aroids do extremely well in this method, and as you can see, the roots, I had no casualties here. Nothing broke when removing it from the yarn. They do extremely well. I mean, I've worked with Monstera, Pothos, Philodendron, all in the yarn medium, and look at how healthy these roots are. And the other thing is, sorry, I hit the camera, there is not a transitionary period if you're going to repot these. Because they've been growing in yarn, they're used to having that wet-dry cycle that happens normally in soil, and these are not water roots. If they were water roots, they'd be all white and brittle. These are ready to transplant into soil. So another great reason or benefit that I found in propagating in yarn. I'm going to keep this in the yarn because I just like the way it looks and the plant is not suffering in any way. So I'm going to put it back into its cup and pack it in a little bit. Sorry guys, I'm so close to the camera. I'm trying to do this from 2 points of view. There we go. Okay, you can see the roots there. The plant is really doing well. Probably get some new leaves as well. Other than that, I have a bunch of other cuttings. This is an bridal Coleus cutting I just put into this yarn. Really interesting looking yarn. And I'm using the reddish orange and I guess that's black yarn mix, because when this plant gets in full sun, it has a lot of red or orange. It has purple, deep purple, and then yellow on the outside. So I didn't have yellow in there, so the white's going to have to match. But it's going to look really, really cool when this plant roots and grows and I put it in full sun. So yeah, that's awesome. There's a bunch of other plants here that I can show you that have been thriving in the yarn. This is Hemigraphis. As you can see, it is in the yarn. I don't know if you can see any of the roots at this point, but this plant has been growing like crazy and it's throwing out roots because the yarn really offers a lot of humidity to the air. And you can see we got aerial roots at all the nodes here. It's doing really well. So yeah, this plant's another one in the yarn, doing well. I also have, and I think I've shown this in previous videos, this is a Sansevieria cutting that was in water, and I transferred it to the yarn. And I transferred it to the yarn around the same time as I had put this other Pothos cutting in the yarn. You can see I use the same color yarn. I guess I use what I have available. You can see the roots all along the bottom here. These have been in yarn for months. I'd say 4 to 6 months. I don't really know exactly. I didn't keep track of when these were put in, but they were both very neglected, and when I put them in yarn, I was like, okay, these are done, let me move them aside, and I forgot about them, and they were wilting, and this one wasn't wilting. Sansevieria wasn't wilting. The Pothos was wilting, so I watered them. Some of these roots have died. The darker ones are no longer viable, but the lighter ones are. So you can see that this has had some trauma because I was being a bad plant dad. But Sansevieria thrive in it, Pothos, Philodendron, Coleus. Let's see what else. This is another Coleus that has been in yarn for quite some time that I again, threw it aside, and I said, all right, it's in yarn, bye-bye. And I kind of forgot about it. Plant was struggling for so long, and I felt so bad. So I said, you know what? This plant is like one of the poster childs for growing in polyester yarn. As you can see, look at all those beautiful roots. Fantastic. So I brought it to the front. I started to water and feed it, and now it's starting to grow again. I'm getting lots of new growth and new buds down here. What I'm going to do with this plant is keep it in the yarn. I'm going to keep it in here just like with the other plants, a lot of the other plants. I'll probably cut and take some cuttings, so this will bush out, but there are no signs of stopping. I give this some feed as well. I use AeroGarden and or MaxiGrow, depending on what I feel like that day. But yeah, let me see what else I got. Here is a Haworthia. This plant, when I had gotten it, was in one of those little like 2-inch pots, plastic pots, and it was in soil. Soil was very dry, so I took it out, and all of the roots, almost all the roots, 95% of the roots were still attached, but they were flat. Like when you touch them, they're just like the outer skin. There was no root in there that was viable. So I removed all the roots, and at one point there was absolutely nothing but a nub at the base. So I took it and I said, you know what? Let me give it a shot in the yarn, because all the other plants I've been putting in yarn have been surviving and thriving. So put it in, and sure enough, we've got root, 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 lots of roots, and new leaves growing from the center, as you can see. There's a dry leaf here. I didn't remove it. I'm just going to leave it there for now because I don't want to disturb what's going on. But the plant is thriving. It's doing well. So you can see the condensation here because I don't keep this soaked. I wet it, and when I fill it up with water, everything kind of saturates the yarn. I turn it upside down, dump out the rest, and just let it sit and absorb the moisture that's there. And it maintains some, as you can see the condensation, but it's not waterlogged. And this plant is loving it, loving it. Firm, healthy, no signs of desiccation, except for that one leaf. That's the old leaf down there. Doing really well in the yarn. So if you're thinking of using yarn as a propagation method, great. If you're thinking of growing long-term in yarn, like I'm doing with a lot of these, this is a begonia, Rex begonia that I shown in the previous video. In yarn, propagation, doing great. So yeah, if you're thinking of propagating yarn, if you're thinking of growing long-term in yarn, all of those things are possible. If you have any questions about it, definitely reach out, because from my experimentation, I can kind of avert you from making the same mistakes that I made, keeping your plants really healthy, and what I've learned I can share with you so you won't have to go through that learning curve. But yeah, I have so many really cool. This is another Sansevieria in a pretty blue yarn. Again, I let this dry out before I water it again, because this is, I guess they considered semi-succulents, Sansevieria. But look at this, all the new leaves that are coming up now. Really, really doing well. So anyway, let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, another Sansevieria in a tube with some yarn. Doing well. If you have any questions or comments or anything, just leave them below and I will get back to you. I always do. I love talking about plants. I know I keep saying that, but it's worth mentioning again. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.